Blessings in Jesus to my dear friends and brethren down under in Australia and New Zealand, to the Kiwis and the Aussies, to the fans of the All Blacks. I know you just lost to the Springboks, but you've got a lot of Springbok fans in New Zealand. And of course, to the Wallaby fans in Australia. Rugby season is now over. The World Cup will have been completed by the time you hear this, but it was an interesting season. But we're hardly here to talk about sports, are we? We're here to talk about Jesus. Two Moriel board members, Pastor Marco Quintana, who pastors a Moriel-affiliated church near Los Angeles, and David Lister, who's the international administrator of Moriel, are coming to New Zealand and to Australia, and they'll be doing a series of meetings. Marco has never been to Australia before. David has been there, but mainly on administrative type meetings. They will be speaking, and we would encourage you, if you're able to come and hear them. Marco is a particularly good preacher. David is, of course, an evangelist to Mormons. And then something of an expert in apologetics to Mormonism, but he's the international administrator of Moriel. They will be there, and they will be there in their own right, not in lieu of myself. I hope to be able to come to Australia and New Zealand again in the hopefully not too distant future, possibly next year, the forthcoming year. If the Lord should open that door and allow that to happen, I would look forward to it. We have many requests for me to go there. I've not been there in a long time. I've not been there since before COVID. The communications, of course, that we've gotten over the last few years from Australia have been diverse. Obviously, invitations to come there, but that was not possible during COVID. We had people from Australia rejoicing that David Andrews was no longer in power in Victoria, and that Ahern was no longer in power in New Zealand. A lot of Christians were praying against those people being in power because they saw them as inimical, not only to Australia's freedom, but particularly to the freedom and rights of Christians. That was one of the things people were concerned with during the COVID. Other things that people were concerned with were, of course, the scandals that have overtaken Hillsong. Now, Frank Houston, of course, was originally from New Zealand, came to Australia. As most of you know, we warned about Hillsong 25 years ago. Myself and Philip Powell, who's now with the Lord, knew, and he really knew, preachers from the older generation of the Assemblies of God, older generation of Pentecostal preachers in New Zealand and Australia, who knew very well about the pedophilia and bisexuality of Frank Houston. It was no secret. The Royal Commission said it happened. And the only reason Brian Houston was found not guilty was not because he failed to report it, but because he was able to present evidence, or his lawyers were, his solicitors were, his barristers were, that the victims did not want it to go to the police. But it happened. You had similar such scandals with Carl Lynn, just very, very ugly in New York, the sex scandals, and a number of other Hillsong churches. Of course, Mr. Houston has been found, Brian has been found in inappropriate behavior with women. And then, of course, there's the driving under the influence charge in the United States. These things should not surprise us. There were people, Australian people, warning us what was really happening a number of years ago. I had musicians who were in Darlene Zschech's backup band telling me what was really going on, that it was just a business. They left. These things have shocked many Australian Christians. They shouldn't have shocked anyone. They certainly did not shock the people who followed the ministry of Moriel. I'm sorry it happened. Now they've got Mike Bickle in the United States, very similar. It's been going on for years with him. It went on for years with Bill Hybels. But eventually these things come out. And they've come out in Australia. And they've come out in Hillsong. That has been another thing that transpired down under in my long absence. I would like to say, though, that what's happening now in Israel and the Middle East has been, well, virtually apocalyptic in nature. Jesus said you'll be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. I remember when the Muslims rioted in Cronulla and on Bondi Beach in Sydney. I knew that any country that allowed the immigration of fundamentalist Muslims is going to reap the whirlwind. That happened in the United States, September 11th. It's happening in Sweden, in France, in Holland. It's certainly happening in Great Britain. I am not against Arabs, obviously. I love Arab believers, and I do draw a distinction between moderate Muslims and radical ones. But you can't always do that, because Islam has the doctrine of tawhid, permissible lying. They're allowed to say they believe in peace and tolerance when they don't, because it's not seen as a lie. It's seen as military disinformation to the infidel and a jihad. When they say peace to you, they use a different term, not salim, but hudna in Arabic. I've explained these things before. Australia has a significant problem. When I saw Muslim gangs rioting, protesting in Sydney, saying, gas the Jews, gas the Jews. This is shocking. This does not represent the spirit of most Australians, but it's there, and it's happening. And it's happening in a lot of other countries as well. Another area of concern. We have had a very favorable response in our request for prayer and also for the support we've sent to believers in the Israeli military. We just lost another one day before yesterday. A young girl, 21, was killed in combat in the Israeli military. She's the second believer killed within about a week's time. Most believers in the Israeli military volunteer for combat brigades. They believe it's part of their testimony. And the response we've had from Australia and New Zealand has been very encouraging. God will bless those who bless Israel and who bless the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I would also like to say that despite the international media bias, and it's everywhere, including Australia, but I would say that Sky News Australia has been comparatively fair compared to most international news platforms. Sky News Australia. And you've had some journalists who've showed integrity, particularly Andrew Bolt. Now, I know he's not a believer, but he's fair and he's honest. You do have some outstanding figures, thankfully, in the Australian news media who are not caught up in the propaganda of the mainstream media. I thank God for that. And I do pray that the Lord will cause those people to come to faith. Many of them have pro-Christian sympathies, as well as at least a fair disposition towards Israel. So that's what's happening. I do hope to be able to come down under before too long if the Lord opens the door. This year, I have to go to Ireland. I'm committed. And I have to go to India. The orphanage we've opened is doing extremely well. It's flourishing. Its opening was delayed over 1.5 years because of COVID. And the Ministry of Health wouldn't let us open it in India, but it's open now and it's doing very well and it's growing by God's grace. But we're also opening a new church in Punjab near Amritsar, where there's radical Sikhism and there has been a fair amount of persecution. In fact, a heavy amount of persecution. So we're opening a new church there. We've just built. It's a building. And we would ask your prayers for our work in India, Moriel's work in India. Meanwhile, Marco and David will be there. I just want to assure our friends in Australia that we love you very much. I love you very much. And although I don't see you too much, we know that you're watching on internet. We know that you're following us on the podcast. And we know that your prayers and friendship and fellowship are with us, despite my not having been able to be there since before COVID. May the Lord bless you, and may the Lord bless Australia, and may the Lord bless New Zealand. Thank you so very much.